When it came to slavery in EU4, well, it was for all intents and purposes terrible, as it would only exist as a trade good, slaves, and that trade good was very bad. Especially when you consider that banning slavery re-rolled all of your slaves and you could get gems, gold, ivory, all of these wonderful trade goods instead of slaves. But we are now in the age of EU5, with advanced mechanics like people exist, and people have jobs, and of course the crucial one, buildings need jobs to operate, meaning that with these changes, well, one must wonder, is slavery now viable within EU5? Like, if you are slavery maxing, well, is it an optimal strategy to actually partaking? Is it overpowered or frankly even viable? Well, before we answer that question, as always, just a quick pit stop to say that a like would be appreciated and a subscription would be amazing. The quest for 100k subs remains, and while an ambitious goal, well, I believe we can get there. Finally, if you're interested in EU5 or anything else in the Paradox store, please do use code LemonCake, it does help support the channel. But with all that said, let's return to the question at hand and embark on, unfortunately, another tangent, but I promise this one is important for answering the earlier question. See, this is the Kingdom of Hungary. I do hope you already knew that. But as we pop into Hungary, well, I have a question for you. I'm currently looking at the integration map mode, which shows us our provinces in terms of their core status. And as you may have spotted already, one very specific province within our land is not cored. This one over here. Why is that? Well, we obtain a core when we have a majority culturally accepted population in the area. So, for example, if we take a look at our capital and our demography, 97.8% of the people inside of our capital are Hungarian. This means we have over 50% of the people in that province culturally accepted, and hence we have obtained a core in the province, giving us a bunch of modifiers that are good and not giving us any debuffs. We can also, again, just accept other people. They don't have to be primary. If we take a look in the more northern parts of our land, which are full of Slovaks, which we've accepted, well, they are, again, 86.2% of population here, but they are an accepted culture, so we have, yet again, another core. Excellent. This province, however, which I'm not even going to try, Jazbereni, Jazzberry. We're going to go with Jazzberry, right? Well, Jazzberry over here is full of, you've guessed it, the jazz, and we've not accepted the concept of jazz, which is very sad. But this also means that we do not have a core in this province, as the majority population is not accepted. So why do I bring this up? Well, that is to say that cores are not permanent, unlike EU4, where if you just get a core on a province, you kind of tend to keep it unless you then lose the land. You can actually lose cores on territories if you stop having a majority population on them. Some of the more eagle-eyed viewers, dare I say, might have noticed that one of the mechanics of the core rule settlement is only primary and accepted cultures actually grow in them, which means you wouldn't passively, due to pop growth, lose cores because you're only allowed to get pop growth of your primary and accepted cultures, so that's fine. But that's regarding pop growth. There is another mechanic to this, migration. And the thing with migration is migration does not discriminate based upon cultures. Well, it does, but more specifically, of course, is that once you have some immigrants coming in or some immigrants leaving, they're allowed to arrive at cored lands even if they're not culturally accepted. This is made even more noticeable because certain nations, Hungary for example is one of them, have privileges like invite German settlers that gives you regular German settler migration events, most likely Germans that you haven't culturally accepted, and when those pops do arrive inside of your land, they can in some cases actually end up outnumbering the locals, and when they do, you will end up losing cores on that land unless you go back and accept those Germans that you've just invited through these mechanics. Now, obviously, losing a core is bad. If we take a look at the modifiers for an integrated rural settlement, we see that it gives you +5 max control, as well as increasing separatism. Now, the max control is good, but it's actually bad compared to a core, as a core gives you 20%, and an integrated province, if we take a look at this one over here, it gives you only +5, so it's an effective -15% max control, but more importantly, it decreases pop assimilation speed by -10 flat as well. This means pretty much passively, you're not going to culturally convert any of those pops like ever. -10 integrated is destroying your base, and whatever modifiers you have here are not going to be relevant. The problem, of course, is that the way that you would integrate people into your society is usually through, of course, cabinet actions. So you would go to your cabinet, you would appoint a cabinet member. This is a pretty good one because you're looking for the diplomatic skill, so that is wonderful. And after appointing him, we can go ahead and select the very specific assimilate pops into our cultural action. We're going to pick Hungarian, doesn't matter as long as it's someone you've accepted, and we can go ahead and assign him to go and convert that province. But here is the secondary issue. You are much more effective at converting pops into your culture on places where you've actually got a core and accepted them. This means that if we compare Pest over here, or even some of these other rural settlements, we're getting 104 monthly assimilation in these provinces. But because of the lower control, and because it's not a cored province, it's merely an integrated province, we're only getting plus 19 assimilation over here instead, because of the lack of control debuffs. Now, of course, our spiritualism isn't helping either, but you do get my point. In essence, when dealing with populations that are not of your primary or accepted culture, it is important to bear in mind that you have some kind of carrying capacity where you can handle a certain amount of that population. But once that population number gets too high and you start losing cores on the land, well, you're going to have a significantly easier time culture converting them when you have the core in the province. And I do mean quite a significant time. If you compare these two neighborhood provinces, this is a 5 to 1 relative ratio, a 20 to 100. And it's actually a bit worse than that, right? And you may be wondering, how does this relate to slavery? And I'm just going to put it out there, you're probably not going to be culturally and religiously accepting the population that you've enslaved and brought to your lands. Bit of a spoiler. So if we take a look at Genoa over here, which actually starts the game with a slave market, we will see that they also begin the game with 1,510 starting slaves. Genoa has a population of 163,000 pops. Now, not all of them are accepted, this is true. However, this 1,510 slaves is literally 0.9%, less than 1% of the population. They are, for all intents and purposes, pretty much irrelevant. In fact, they're actually outnumbered by the soldiers that are inside of the province, right? And what all of this means is that not only is it significantly easier to actually culturally and religiously assimilate, if you wish to do so, these slave pops, you don't really need to because you already have a large cultural majority, so you are going to be maintaining the score, right? You're fine. So it's not an unmanageable concept. You can have slavery and not lose cores on all of your land, right? I just wanted to be clear. But it's something that you have to manage, and this is another dynamic that you have to deal with. That being said, this is not exclusive to slavery. This applies to any kind of immigration build, because fundamentally, on a national level, you have a problem that you have open jobs that are not being filled, and you import either immigrants or slaves to fill up and fill those jobs. That's it. And this is another part that we now have to address, and that is that if you think that, okay, I have a population, in the case of Genoa here, let's say of 500k, that means that I can now afford to import 500k slaves because they would be right below that 50% margin if I import 500k of them, so I wouldn't lose any cores, so it would be very, very wrong. Because your population tends to be relatively spread out as best as it can be. If we yet again look at the population map mode, let's zoom out a bit more so the tooltip doesn't cover it. But as you can see, our population, is concentrated within our capital city, sure, but is relatively spread out, right? Our provinces next to Genoa, these places over here still have like 27,000 pops. We still have like 60,000 pops over here. We still have like 33,000 pops over here. However, when we get both immigrants and slavery, what's going to happen is they're not going to go and spread themselves out evenly. No, because both immigration and also when you acquire slaves, they're going to go towards places where you don't have any jobs. To be clear, open jobs create immigration attraction. What's going to happen is we're going to arrive to certain provinces. Let's say we want to improve the lumber industry here. And if we were to do that right now, we have plenty of peasants, our own peasants, to take those jobs. That'll be fine. They'll just need to wait for them to promote in. But let's say we didn't have those peasants. We'll build this lumber RGO up, right? We can queue up a couple of them. And what this is going to do is it's going to create 4,000 jobs. Let's say, again, we don't have those available peasants to fill them. This is then going to push all of our immigration, or at least most of our immigration and most of our slave acquisition into these places that don't have jobs. So you don't have to consider it on a national level of, okay, I have 500k accepted culture pops, in our case 340k Ligurians, right? So therefore I can import this amount of pops to be just under that 50% margin. You have to take into account that you're going to be concentrating all your immigrants and slaves within the same location, because you really want to avoid that situation where you lose cores, as that makes future integration of those provinces that much harder. But okay, maybe you just want to culturally accept those pops instead, right? You don't have to culture convert them. Well, that brings us to our second issue, and that is how cultural acceptance works in this game. Accepting cultures costs cultural capacity. So for example, here on Genoa, we're currently using 0.07 out of our 1.5 because we are tolerating Corsicans. And the reason it's so incredibly cheap to tolerate these Corsicans, despite having 13% of our population being Corsican, is that we actually get along with Corsicans quite well. We're both Italians, we both share religion. I mean, we're quite chill with the Corsicans, right? And that means that even if we were to go ahead and actually accept them, this would only cost us 0.23, despite them being 13% of the population. The Greeks, meanwhile, I think we get along with the Greeks relatively well as well, but as you can see, we don't get along with the Greeks that well. They're Hellenic culture group, not Italian, so these cultural capacities are going to be significantly higher. We'll now have to pay 0.97 to tolerate the Greeks and a whole 2.92 cultural capacity to accept them, despite them being only 5.2% of the population. These two numbers, the cost scale with both the percentage of the population that they are inside of your society and how you get along with them. And there's actually a very, very good country to show the absolute extreme of this case: the Kingdom of Man in the Isle of Man. See, they begin the game as North Gaelic, which is Celtic, Scottish, British, Scandinavian, so they're inside all of the culture groups. But they really do not get along with the English, and the English really do not get along with them. As you can see by these two crosses, they hate each other. We have a very negative opinion. That makes sense. But that means that to accept just 4.64% of the population of the English, which is what we do, we start with the English accepted. This is costing us 1.46 of our cultural capacity. Sorry, just to tolerate them, that's even worse. Well, if we wanted to full on accept them, so to core any English provinces, that would cost us 4.4 cultural capacity. Let's compare that to the Northumbrians. Now, we have a lot more Northumbrians in our country, 28% Northumbrians. To tolerate the Northumbrians, which is a significantly larger part of our population, it would cost us 1.09. We're already paying 1.46 just to tolerate the English. And there's more than 5-to-1 ratios between the English and Northumbrians in our population, simply because we get along much worse. And that's kind of the other part with accepting slaves, right? In general, they're probably not going to be too happy that they've been kidnapped and moved into your country to work on the plantations, which means that you can probably guess you're not going to get along too well within this cultural opinion view, meaning that accepting them is going to be even more painful for you. So again, cultural assimilation is kind of your only option here. It's way too disproportionately expensive to culturally accept and tolerate all of these pops, and being over cultural capacity is expensive and painful. Well, I guess it's not expensive, it doesn't physically cost you money, but to demonstrate here, if we want to accept the English, which would cost us a pretty impressive 4, being over cultural capacity, being 2.4 over, is going to reduce our efficiency of cabinet and reduce our cultural tradition and cultural influence very significantly. So yeah, I would not recommend doing this naturally. That is, of course, being over your accepted culture limit. Well, that all sounds pretty grim, right? Does that mean we need to dismiss slavery now because it doesn't work, and dismiss immigration and all of those strategies? Well, not really. Let's make sure we remain on the same fundamental level of understanding here. You are going to have issues where you run out of pops to work certain buildings when you are settling the new world, or even in the old world, or in general, whatever you're doing. Not in every campaign, but that just happens, right? Most places in the world, and I've returned to Hungary here, are significantly below their total population, like, cap, right? So, for example, the town of Pest can have 343k pops living there, and they have 35k. Hungary is disproportionately depopulated for how large and how good their land is for population capacity, and if you're wondering why, well, blame the Mongols. Either way, this means that if you are playing nations like Hungary, or anyone after the Black Death, one of the things you're going to realize is that as you start to build up your economy, so for example, I want to go and dig gold in this province, a generally pretty good idea, well, I will at some point start running out of pops. In this case, not. There are enough locals here to work these gold mines, but as you get more RGO levels, and as you fight wars and lose population, etc., 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 you will start running into not having enough pops to work all your jobs. Again, not every campaign. This doesn't happen every time, but this is an issue that comes up. And immigration and slavery are solutions to these problems, right? Of course, both of them have issues that I've just talked about, and you can mess them up in this regard, but that doesn't stop the fact that if you just import a bunch of slaves or import a bunch of immigrants to work those jobs, the problem of you don't have anyone to work those jobs, well, that's the solved problem now, right? You have inherently solved that problem. And I think this is one of the things that we need to understand in that regard, is that there are extra drawbacks to it, but it is a solvable problem. Is it implicitly overpowered? I wouldn't say that. What is overpowered, of course, is sugar plantations in the Caribbean. They do pretty much mint money. You know what else mints money? Gold mines. Those can also be operated as RGO workers with slaves, right? Or immigrants. In either way, what is broken here is not slavery as a concept, it's high value trade goods that you're building up a production line. And at the end of the day, whether you have peasants that immigrated to your land or slaves working the plantations doesn't actually matter to you that much. Slavery is, in some ways, at the end of the day, just a solution to a problem that has its own problems on the side, but that's about it. That being said, though, there is another aspect to slavery that we need to discuss. And for that, we've gone into the Ottomans, and let's now take a look at these level 2 slave markets in Bursa. They convert trade goods, that is to say, they convert paper, they convert weaponry, they convert tools, they convert leather into slaves. The actual slaves trade good. And as you can see by these modifiers in this list over here, this is a very profitable endeavor. You can also obtain slaves by raiding, by capturing them in the local area and, things like slave markets that provide local monthly enslavement to the provinces, right? And this is very good. There's no two ways around it. This is a lot of money because the actual slaves as a trade good on a level of themselves are a very, very profitable endeavor. And it only gets more profitable as you play into the game. Because even if you're not colonizing, Castile, France, England, Portugal, if they don't get eaten by Castile, these nations are going to be colonizing. I've even seen Denmark and Norway colonize a decent chunk of the time. And Netherlands, well, I don't think they survive against France these days. Depends on the patch, so your results will vary. But they're going to colonize. They're going to setting up their plantations. And you've guessed it, they're going to create demand for slaves. All of this is to say that the real money in slaves isn't using the slaves. The real money in slaves are the slave markets, raiding for slaves and selling those slaves, right? So to answer the question of viability in slavery, we have to discuss how we actually end up using this, right? Because as a trade good level, this is incredible. This is plus 17.32 potential profit ducats on 2 levels on a starting building. You're not getting this anywhere else this early, right? Our cloth is a very, very effective building here. This is an excellent building. This is a really good building. It's 3.15. Tools. Again, another excellent industry. We don't have throughput on the area, but it's an excellent industry, 1.35. It is just incomparable to the amount of money you can make from slavery. And this is pretty low demand. This is 1337. We're not demanding that many slaves at the moment. This number's only going to go up, and this is something that we need to understand. So to really drive the point home and answer the question posed in the title of the video, is slavery good in EU5? Yes, but only if you're not getting higher for your own supply. Great to sell people as slaves, not implicitly amazing to actually use them as slaves yourself. Right, well I hope I've answered your question here today, but with that all being said, that is unfortunately all the time I have for you. Thank you very much for watching, with a special thank you to all my channel members, especially Ark, Solus, Lemon, Lord Zendika, Nick Castan, Hatan, Star72, The Awesome Rabbit, Best Pro Gaming, Grabmore, Flavia, Lebarule, W Haste Sov, Anthony35, AC Napo, Conspiracy Pizza, Yukata, Danray, Marv Jack, Ryland, Stuart Allen, Andrew Black, Nebula, Zentronic, Twinit, and Aquabird.